And this is also important when we're making these predictions or anticipations. I'm reluctant to move forward with one person's claim. But when we start to see a couple people, couple economists all in agreement, that's when I would start to, turn my head a little bit. Good morning, investors. Bradley here from Watson Estates, and you're listening to the largest, fastest growing podcast for Toronto real estate on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Keep your head up. There's some big changes coming to the housing market near you. Today, we're going to talk about the current state of our market. We're going to get into some changes that have kind of leaked. We have some insight on what type of recommendations are going to be presented at the provincial level. We're going to cover those, as well as some of my predictions for the next few months. But today is all about change. We're going to have fun along the way. I mean, how many anti-vaxxers does it take to change a light bulb? None. They're happy living in the dark. But our listeners, you guys want to come into the light. You want to know what's going on, and that's why I love you. So today we're going to break this all down for you. And if you're maybe joining us for the first time, consider following our show more and more. And if you've been getting value, please share this on Instagram. You can tag us at Watson Estates. Make me feel good. And the organic growth is what we're looking for. We're in the middle of January and we're experiencing the highest downloads we've ever had. And I really do anticipate that number to continue to grow as we see more investors coming out of our ears and entering the real estate market. They want to know what's going on. And I believe this is the best place to do that because at the end of the day, as a broker investor myself, I'm researching the best I can and presenting it to you guys free of charge out of the kindness of my heart. We have lots of fun. And if you guys want to get more involved investing in real estate as an active partner, we have a coaching program you check out. Where do we monetize? This is where we do it, right? We have all these other things. I want to be able to offer you guys something of value from our show. Well, this is it. If you want to learn how to be an active partner and scale your real estate portfolio to levels that you see from our guests that come on the show all the time, check out the 90-Day Landlord course. But enough with the self-promotion. Let's get into talking about the state of our market. Today, guys, we have a wonderful episode. You're going to learn a ton. Even if you follow our show, there is some serious gold nuggets in this episode. I'm thrilled. I love bringing you guys the best. So we're going to start off today with a Globe and Mail article. You ready? Here we go. Get your seatbelts on. Toronto buyers pounce on rare January listing. That's the name of the article. Buyers in the Toronto area real estate market appear to be moving with great speed this January as they pounce on the very rare listings that appear. They're talking to Devel Morrison, a broker of Bosley Real Estate. Here's what she says. She knows of some potential buyers who are waiting in the wings, but unlike buyers, they're not in a rush. One investor has a tenant in a condo unit, and that sometimes makes showings difficult. We'll cover a little bit more on that down the show here today. But others are move-up buyers who would like a bigger home but won't sell an existing home until they found it. Problem is they can't find anything. So we end up in this giant stalemate, the one that we've been talking about on our show for quite some time. Now, this is another agent from Sutton Group, and I honestly have no idea. Prodipto is the first name, the last name, not even going to try. But they expect the market, this is a realtor from Sutton Group Realty Systems, they expect the market to be busy in the coming weeks with buyers trying to purchase a property while they can take advantage of pre-approved mortgage agreements, which is a fantastic point. The rates have gone up recently in anticipation of a rising interest rates by quite a good margin. I've got some, actually one of my neighbors where I live works at Scotiabank, and I'm just checking the rates. We recently just got approved and are closing on a property with a Scotiabank rate, and it's gone up by a lot, at least, 0.75% in the last few months. I was shocked when he told me what the selling rate was, but I really want to try this guy's name. This guy's name's Prodipto Sarbidikari. There you go. Nailed it. Moving on. What are interest rates doing? So we know the interest rates is a big question mark for people. Well, guess what? The Bank of Canada so far has predicted a rise in mid-2022, but I sense things may be moving a little quicker. Stephen Brown, senior Canada economist at Capital Economics, believes the central bank's latest business and consumer surveys suggest the upside risk to inflation over the next couple of years have increased and raised the chance of a trend-setting committee will raise its key rate as soon as, get this, next week. That's right. There is a possibility, a good possibility, we could see interest rates bump up even as early as next week, January 26th. Keep an eye out for that. And so here's what they say, getting into kind of why. The economists had figured the bank would be too concerned about the negative optics to raise rates during the Omicron wave of the pandemic and would instead tee up a hike in March or April. And the standout development in the latest surveys is that the share of firms facing products and labor shortages surged again, with those intensifying trends putting upward pressure on prices and wages. Well, that's a run-on sentence. Excuse me. A simple colon would do this guy some good, right? Then again, you got to be careful when you add colons to sentences. It can completely change things. Like, for example, Jane ate her friend's sandwich, or Jane ate her friend's colon. Ugh, moving on. But Stephen Brown isn't the only one expecting rates to rise soon. When we're making these predictions or anticipations, I'm reluctant to move forward with one person's claim. But when we start to see a couple people, couple economists all in agreement, that's when I would start to, turn my head a little bit. Better Dwelling, the king of clickbait titles, the article just for fun, for giggles here. The Bank of Canada will raise rates in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. This was written earlier this past week. So they're talking next week as well. Said they would end the year 500% higher in interest rates. 500%. Are you ready, baby? It's from a JP Morgan article. We'll get into clarifying what that looks like. But America's largest bank is making a bold call for Canada's central bank. It will raise rates within days. JP Morgan economist Silvano Domino shared their forecast for Canadian interest rates. JPM sees the Bank of Canada hiking the overnight rate 5 times in 2022, very much in line with what the banks have said so far, sending it 500% higher. There's the clickbait. The most surprising is how soon they'll see this. They say by the end of this month. In other words, this week coming up. The overnight rate, to clarify, at 500% higher. What does that look like exactly? Well, for those of you who are good with numbers, we're at 0.25% right now. The prediction they're looking for is 1.5%. So yes, that 500% increase doesn't put you really out of whack with what we're seeing from the major banks. It's actually directly in line with what we've been predicting and discussing with you guys, has been predicted from the banks. But 500% sounds more interesting, right? Your interest rates, you're going to see your mortgage rate go up 500%. That's not what's happening here. We have a modest increase and still relatively record low interest rates, even with these increases that are being forecasted here. But why do they see it rising soon? This particular group, JP Morgan, strong employment and inflation are the primary reasons their forecasts have accelerated. The bank points to Canada having 250,000 more employed people than pre-pandemic. So maybe we're doing okay. The participation rate has recovered and unemployment is near February 2020 levels. Quote, the recovery and continued growth in the labor market after the severe provincial lockdowns of last spring has been nothing short of remarkable. So this isn't just a matter of interest rates are going to go up because inflation is off the charts. It also has to do with the solid fundamentals in employment across the country. We get these two different perspectives. The last time the overnight rate began to climb back in 2017, macro indicators, they say, weren't this impressive. So there is a lot of reasons to believe we're going to see those interest rates rise even sooner than expected. But keep in mind, rising interest rates is a good thing. That's something that we want to see. You as an investor, you want to see that, right? But then critics get mad about rates dropping and prices rising, therefore. But then they get mad at rates rising as well. I mean, you can't win either way. You can't have it both ways. Then again, if you ask an electrician to change a fuse and he does, he technically refused. But let's get into some weekly numbers. Keep you guys posted on some more specifics on what's going on in the 416 freeholds. We had 81 net listings in the last week, which is only up from 62 the week before. And it's 300 lower than last year. So last year was an exceptional winter season. Maybe we're looking at a season of spring being more in line with past years, not so much like last year. I honestly, I still think we're going to see an early spring, but it doesn't seem to have crept out yet, though we do see a slight increase in the freehold, but not the same when it comes to condos. In fact, they only added 19 new condos in the 416 this week. That's kind of brutal. And last week was at 83. So we see this tightening in the months of inventory in the condo space. Months of inventory is actually rising, believe it or not, for both freehold, which now sits at 1.69 months, which is a shockingly high increase. I think that number will bounce back down. Same with the condos. We see this increase right now. Months of inventory in the 416 sitting at 1.323 months. We'll watch over the next 2 weeks to see if that's just a bounce. We might find that to be the case. I think we will. But interesting nonetheless that months of inventory has gone up quite a bit. And this isn't necessarily the case across the country. When we look at the sales to new listings ratio, if you're like a foreign investor, you're looking at all of these major cities. From the sales to new listings ratio, it's actually interesting. The higher number, by the way, means it's a tighter market. But when we look at Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, and Ottawa, the other non-Toronto cities range from 0.71 all the way up to 1.01, which is Montreal, super tight right now. But Toronto sits at the bottom of that list with a 0.64 sales to new listings ratio. So though it seems crazy and hectic in Toronto, in the big picture across the country, it's actually not as bad, believe it or not. I don't know how that makes sense, but that's what the numbers tell us. And as of mid-January, condo sales are down year over year, 27%. Freehold is down 31% compared to last year, but it's important to note the entire year will probably be low compared to last year. But when we pair it up against 2020 and 2019, they're high. So we have higher record highs apart from last year, which was just an absolute crazy number of sales that we experienced throughout the year. One thing that I thought was interesting, and to kind of wrap all of this up, is have you ever wondered how many offers are received on a property within your city? Well, thanks to Scott Ingram, and according to Broker Bay, wow, not every brokerage participates in Broker Bay, but a lot of them do. So it is a bit of a submarket, but we're able to see how many offers were placed on average for properties that sold. The winner in this scenario, believe it or not, the average in Durham is 10. 10 offers. Halton is 8, Toronto's 5.7, Peel 5.6, and York 5. Even 5 offers on the average property sounds crazy. And in the big picture, we probably have one property that's got 30, another one that's got 1 or 2. This is the overall average. But when your average, like Durham is 10 offers per property, good luck. People are just tripping over themselves out in Durham. Now, news like this is what leads a man to drink, right? My doctor advised me to stop drinking, but it's going to be a massive change for me. You know, I've been with that guy for 15 years. So let's go on to the ongoing supply issue, which is the cost to build in Toronto. So here we go, guys. We talked about this on our last episode, but I saw this blog article and I wanted to draw attention to it. It says Toronto's ranked one of the most expensive cities in the world to build a house. We talked about this recently, but this actually comes from a separate news source out in the UK, Capital on Tap, suggesting that despite the relatively cheap cost of building materials in Canada's largest city, Toronto remains one of the most expensive places in the world to buy a house. The firm looked at 50 different cities around the world, and Toronto placed, for most expensive cities, 8th. And actually, Vancouver is sitting at 9th, just to have some fun down the list. Hong Kong, number 1. London, Tokyo, New York, Singapore, San Francisco, Seattle, Toronto, Vancouver, Dublin. There's your list. But we know that those costs aren't only, though we see a rising in price and cost of materials, the majority of that in Toronto specifically is coming from these fees, these extra red tapes, these additional soft costs. That's what's happening here. The province's heated housing market can also be found in the land transfer tax revenue. The amount of movement that's happened last year, it's popping up now in the amount of collected revenue from the city. Listen to this. In 2020 to 2022, Ontario collected about $3.7 billion in revenue from land transfer taxes. Want to hedge a guess on what 2021, 2022 is? The total was projected to skyrocket to more than $5 billion, right? The government would love to keep this tax increase. Kind of helpful. But the pressure right now, because of things like this, is that there's time for action is now. Now is the time. Which reminds me of a time my grandma wanted to cut back on eating fast food. She actually went crazy. She decided to be a vegetarian. Ugh, she's changed a lot. It was almost like I'd never seen her before. Herbivore? No, herbivore. Get your protein, kids. But there are 2 problems that are on the table right now. We're going to cover those. And this is the meat and potatoes, which in grandma's case, only the potatoes. Number 1, we need to cut the red tape. Guys, this is what I live for, by the way. These types of updates, this is the gold. This is the magic. This is a global news article start us off, Premier Doug Ford kicks off Housing Summit with funding to help municipalities cut the red tape. Ontario's largest communities will get new funding to help speed up development approvals. Premier Doug Ford announced Wednesday as he met with municipal leaders to discuss ways to address the housing crisis. So what exactly has been offered so far? Well, we got a new $45 million they call Streamlined Development Approval Fund. Will help, they say, 39 of the largest municipalities approve housing applications more quickly. So we're really trying to target and break the timelines, cut the red tape to get developments done quicker. That's the first thing. But they say the province also, in addition, will work with municipalities to develop a data standard for planning and development applications that should speed up the process. Which doesn't sound too sexy, doesn't sound so fun, but we're not there yet. Listen, here's what to watch for. The Progressive Conservative government is expecting a report. We're going to get a report back early this year, and early this year from what sources say would actually be the end of this month, so soon, from a housing affordability task force, which was appointed to look into measures to boost the supply of real estate and ownership housing, reduce red tape, and other options to address housing issues. So this report is going to have all of the suggestions to Doug Ford to put forward to address the housing issues which he had appointed. And here's the thing. Do we need to wait for this report? No, we don't. We have a copy of it right here. The info was leaked through tvo.org. Very exciting, but also recognized, not approved, and not finalized. The reason they got their hand on it is I guess they sent it out to multiple ministries, they say, for their input. So it's gone out there. TVO got their hand out, and they tell us, and then we share it with you on our show. But what is this whole thing? So we've got this task force that was created back in January. I'm trying to find it in my notes, but I can't find it in my notes. Oh, December. And that was the whole point, right? It's chaired by Scotiabank's executive Jake Lawrence and is charged with making recommendations to the government. The real question is the government going to respond or do or apply what is being requested? But the task force, they say in this report, is expected at the end of January, this month. While the draft and its contents might look different 2 weeks from now, obviously, the recommendations seen by tvo.org would, if implemented, listen to the repercussions. It would mean some of the most radical changes to Ontario planning law since the 70s and would undo some of the legacy of that era's politics, which saw greater emphasis placed on local consultation. So we're cutting the consultation and stronger role for communities opposing everything from new highways to apartment tower blocks. Do you want the list? Because you're about to get it, guys. Here we go. Woohoo! You heard it here first. Here we go. Ready, set, go. All right. Suggestion number one in this early draft of the report. The report recommends that municipalities with populations over 100,000 would be required to allow up to 4 units and 4 stories on any single residential lot. Tell me this isn't juicy. Come on now. That's the first one. Number 2. Underused or vacant commercial spaces could also be converted to residential or mixed residential commercial spaces without requiring prior municipal approval. You can just do it. There's a lot of opportunities for commercial spaces that are vacant or underused. Number 3, the province could also set minimum zoning standards province-wide that would prevent cities from using everything from lot size to shade impacts to controlled development. We have a standard. If you meet the standard across the province, we don't really need to look at what the local community has to say. Speeding and cutting the red tape, guys. Number 4, projects of 10 units or fewer could be exempted from site plan approval, which is an additional city process that we currently use, if they otherwise conformed with the city's zoning and official plan policy. As long as you follow the rules and you have less than 10, we don't need any more site plan approvals. Thank you very much, said the small investor. Number 5, the report also recommends prohibiting municipalities from mandating public consultations for such projects if they need only what are called, quote, minor variances. Gone are the days that you'll need to get approvals or prohibitions and, all these extra steps for a minor variance, meaning they're mostly in compliance with the city's rules. It's just kind of a small adjustment. They would just need to be approved. They wouldn't need to have this whole extra process, public consultation for these changes. Number 6, the report argues the province should also restrict the use of, this is interesting, heritage prevention laws, which prevent the abuse of heritage preservation designation process. This whole process of the heritage is being directly attacked here by dramatically reducing the scope of municipal heritage powers and requiring cities to compensate property owners for the loss of development or sales income from their land. If you're getting hurt because of the issues involving heritage buildings, you need to be compensated for that. We can't hide behind the heritage status anymore and cause additional problems. We need to cut the red tape. Wow. Number 7, the report also calls on the province to ensure that municipalities hit legislated timelines for approvals and that the Ontario Land Tribunal, which is the successor of the Ontario Municipal Board, be empowered to penalize municipalities that seek to thwart timely approvals. So if your municipality is taking too long, down comes the slap. No, you're in trouble. They're going to be actually overseeing that the municipalities need to maintain their promises of time. There's going to be in place a guideline that they also have to follow. No more running rampant or completely free at the municipal level. There are going to be timelines in place that they will be in trouble if they can't follow. So this gives us an idea of the recommendations. The question that we have, this could change. All of these things could change, could be more or less. But the question is whether the government will have the stomach for these kinds of major changes in the lead up to the election, which is happening later this year. Is Doug Ford willing to make these changes, or is he like a chameleon that can't change color with a reptile dysfunction? Not to mention, there is a, quote, very finite, not infinite, finite, limited window to introduce new substantial legislation before legislation is dissolved in time for the scheduled June election, which I believe is why they're probably trying to get this out by the end of this month, because we need to have enough time for changes to happen before everything gets dissolved. These are substantial. And I think Doug Ford would be more likely than not willing to delay making these types of decisions in advance of that election. But we will see. And interesting nonetheless on some of the recommendations that we're going to be experiencing in the next few weeks, probably. But number 2 issue right now is the other problem being investors. You freaking investors, get them every time. Better Dwelling likes to talk nicely about investors, saying Canadian cities have seen up to 90% of new real estate supply scooped up by you guys, the investors, you jerks. Which brings me to the second problem we're experiencing right now, which is you guys, investors. Investors are the real issue, the crisis that needs to be attacked, cut their head off, let's go. Especially when you got details like this. Canadian cities have seen up to 90% of new real estate supply scooped by investors. Again, who's got the clickbait? That would be Better Dwelling. Let's jump into some of the data. When we say investors, what they're talking about is non-owner occupied. So according to StatsCan, they define it as vacant, rented out to others, or used as a secondary property. They couldn't cover every market instead, but they did cover Ontario, and we're going to talk about some of those numbers. But I want to clarify, and to protect us from false news here, that the 90% is not Toronto real estate. It's talking about a nice little town called Bay Roberts in Newfoundland, which has the highest percentage of investor-owned buildings, probably because there's nowhere to work there. And they own almost 50% of the total stock as investors. 92% are from recently completed units. Investors have this weird fascination with new builds, as we're going to see in Toronto as well. But here are the actual Toronto stats. Here's what counts. Not 90% of properties. Sounds good, though. Investors owned 18.4% of the housing stock in 2020, which is just shy of 1 in 5, which lines up with the province as a whole. And it isolated to completed homes after 2016, you actually have that investor number bump up to 39%. So when it comes to new builds, new construction, that is in a lot of ways being gobbled up by investors. They're buying, they say, at more than double the usual rate when it comes to new builds. In Ontario as a whole, we see 1 in 5 homes in Ontario are investor owned, but somehow they've managed to scoop 1 in 3 new homes. And this is where a lot of people look at this as a problem, but don't get mad at people who want to buy investment properties. That's just a symptom of the overall problem, right? It's like changing the drinking age of Quebec to 28 and saying it's meant to keep alcohol out of high school. Get it? Because they drink and other things. Quebec is weird with the way that they hit laws. So I think Quebec was a safe way. Or you could go maybe we'll jump down to Alabama or something where they got where do we got high drinking and low graduation rates? I don't know. Fill in the blank. You can reuse that joke with any city that you're kind of hitting on. Moving on. Let's look at the tensions, though, that are experienced between landlords and tenants. See, because landlords, they get a bad rap. you guys, I feel bad for you, but I also sympathize because I know there's a lot of drama out there and the landlord generally comes out as the bad guy. It's the battle of the ages. COVID hasn't helped. COVID protocols slack in Toronto real estate showings, tenant says. A Toronto man renting a condo apartment says real estate agents who showed it to prospective buyers disregarded the COVID protocols. We got a whistleblower, a tenant whistleblower. When he objected, he was warned he could be evicted if he refused to allow others inside, because that's what he ultimately said is, I don't want to let anyone else in here. So let's look at the rules. And I want to be very clear. Maybe I got to be a little careful with what I say, but I want to outline what RIA states right now for what they call safe in-person showing. So they say, please ensure to their members, realtors, ensure that door handles, light switches, counters, cabinet knobs, and other high-touch surfaces are targeted. Once a showing is complete, the home should be cleaned and disinfected again. So when you're done your showing, you should be cleaning all the handles, the light switches. If you touch them, hopefully you don't, but if you do. They also want us professionals, realtors, to conduct as much business online as possible, virtually, in order to avoid all this extra contact, right? The question to you guys out there that are licensed is, are you doing this? Are you doing this? If not, keep your head up. The hair on the back of your neck should rise when we start to hear about what the tenants' complaints are and how this has unfolded for one of our comrades, one of our fellow realtors, which has become a big issue. And it was a top performing agent too. Won't get into those, but Connolly, who's the tenant, says there was 7 showings on the first weekend, each with about 2 prospective buyers and one group that included 4 visitors to his unit. So generally we want 2 or less people, but there was a group that had more. So already you're kind of going outside what's kind of the safe zone for showings. They say 5, they being the tenant, said 5 out of 7 did not follow instructions to sanitize touch surfaces after viewing. So they're just coming in, they're taking a look, and they're leaving. You didn't sanitize. You didn't sanitize. That's the voice. That's the new voice I'm using. But they asked how he could be sure that they were not compliant. Connolly said he was present. So he was there for half the visits. So that's how he knew that. And for the other showings that he wasn't there, he set up a camera, right? Just to watch them for his own safety. He wanted to watch from the safety of his non-house, but, to make sure, keep eyes on. He did not make recordings. Important. He did not make recordings, so it's okay. But he watched from another safe location, right? Quote, I set up a camera for my own safety. And not to disregard the importance of COVID precautions, okay? We should be following the rules of RIA, but I'm sure you can see why having a tenant in a property for sale stinks. And apparently, skunks complain when the wind changes direction. You get what you're shooting, my friend. Connolly also said the brokerage did not attempt to maximize virtual visits before scheduling in-person showings as advised by RIA. I don't know how they did that. I think the way he said is they had stock photos, so they didn't actually have real pictures of the unit, probably because you're in there and they're not really the best photos to be taking, but you didn't follow the precautions that you need to protect and do it online. And the end result of all of this, to bring the story to a conclusion, the second floor condo unit, which Connolly has expressed interest in buying, he was willing to even buy it. He was willing to purchase it at a fair market value, I'm sure. After moving in about a year ago, since has been sold. So the guy sold it out from under him. And believe it or not, he will soon receive an eviction notice because the new owner wishes to occupy the apartment. I kind of feel bad for the guy, but this is the conflict, right? We got pesky tenants, and it's what makes landlords opt to leave their units vacant. That's the end result. In fact, in the second half of 2021, out of the 12,500 condos that sold in Toronto, 5,700 plus were listed as vacant. So that's 46% of the units were vacant. No owner, no tenant. And so when you wonder how many vacant units do we have when our city, is it that high? Probably not. But it's definitely one way to recognize that people, if possible, would like to fight for that vacant unit because they don't want to end up on the cover of a news article. And in this type of conflict, and now what looks like going to be lawsuits, can we just sell my unit? I'm trying to divest my portfolio and add housing stock. Come on. All right. So whatever your thoughts are on that, don't be stupid with your license out there, realtors. Protect the general public. But there's definitely a lot of conflict right now that exists between landlords and tenants. So I want to, in this part now that we've kind of gone through these things, I want to talk about what I see as the most likely changes that are soon coming in 2022. The government has made it clear that they wouldn't penalize primary residences. They're getting caught over and over again investigating what the financial opportunity would look like for the government and if we were to tax a primary residence or all of these different taxes. And they keep getting shut down. They keep saying, trust us, we are not going to tax the primary residence. In a sense, I guess we kind of have to trust them or it's going to look really, really bad. So I'm going to say that we're probably not going to target them as the number one victim in all of this. But who are the bad guys? Who's been the bad guys all the way through? It's the landlords. It's those investors, those pesky investors. They're portrayed as the bad guys in the media. Who is the easy target? And in my opinion, should probably be paid attention to and in some ways targeted. I think that there are a lot of reasons why landlords will be the focus point of the next big changes that take place. Here are the big topics, the big ideas that are on the table. One, at the federal level, would be prevention of foreign investment. I think that's still coming. It would be interesting to see how fast that happens. We also have an increased investors' capital gains tax possibility. Maybe if you're investing in 2-3 properties, your capital gains tax will not just be 50.5 or 50%. It will actually shift for those properties. Or what seems to be another option right now is changing the down payment requirements on second, third properties. You can't just get it for 20%. It's now going to become a little more challenging for you, which hopefully gives an edge to people buying a home as a primary residence. But one exception to this is if you buy multifamily commercial apartments, which we're doing, you get a 95% loan to value. So those won't be impacted, but you guys keep doing what you're doing. You keep putting your 80% down. There's a lot of other opportunities available out there, but for the majority of investors who are looking at residential 4 units or less, yes, you're going to be probably hit by one of these in the coming months. There is significant pressure right now on investors, and you might consider getting, therefore, your next property, if it's a residential property, as soon as possible. Because if we have this, maybe you qualify for something at 20% right now with all the current rates. Not only are rates going up generally, but we also see the risk of your ability to qualify changing if it's a second or third property. So you want to keep your eyes on that and maybe get it done sooner rather than later, just in case that is ultimately what's happening. Another incentive that's boosting investors to run and purchase now. But here is a bold prediction. This one I'm going out on the fringes. This one could pay off or really screw me over. And I'm gonna hedge my bet a little bit with the first part. I think by April 2022, so February, March, April, in less than 3 months, we will see interest rates rise. That's me hedging my bet because I do think that that's going to happen sooner rather than later. But if that does not happen, where we're going out on the fringes here is I think that there is a very good chance of one of those items that I've listed. So we're talking foreign buyer getting cut out of the market altogether. We're talking increasing down payments or in changing or a movement in these are all happening at the federal level because province is not going to do much with the current election in place. But at the federal level, if we don't see interest rates shift, I anticipate that will happen as soon as the early spring market of this year. Something's got to give. There's a lot of people looking at it at various levels of government, and I think it's coming. And my intuition is that it won't be significant from the stuff we talked about that's going to be presented to the provincial government. I don't think any of that's going to happen until after the election. I guess that's another side prediction. And also, I guess one more side prediction. With all of this, if in fact we do see prices get hit and prices come down because of a shock or psychological impact, I expect that condos will take the lower end of the brunt as a percentage. I think historically we do see at the more affordable side, yes, they don't necessarily keep up or haven't kept up with prices, but that actually will end up working in their favor. If things come down, probably like we saw in 2017, you'll have that happen more so on the freehold side. But the question is to you as an investor with the money going into the properties, what do you think? Something's got to give. That's my thoughts. But these are some of the changes that I'm going to be watching for in the next few months. I understand that not everybody likes change, but the real crime is not acting on what you hear. We all know there's nothing fun about getting an Amber Alert and having to switch cars. Okay, that didn't come out right. Scratch that. We're going to put it this way. Sometimes someone unexpectedly comes out of nowhere, makes your heart race, and changes your life forever. I'm hoping that someone is me and this podcast, and not the cops. If we make your heart race, please consider sharing this episode on IG. You can tag us at Watson Estates. And for our closest friends, I truly would appreciate if you guys could leave us a 5-star review and rating on iTunes. It would mean the world. I love you guys, and I'll see you next time. Take care and keep it real.